Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the course of History of English Literature. Students, today we are going to discuss Romantic poet P.B. Shelley. It is the second lecture on P.B. Shelley. In the first lecture I have given you a brief introduction of the characteristics of Shelley, and in today's lecture we are going to have a detailed lecture on the works of Shelley. I am Muhammad Asif Khan, lecturer, Department of English, Cohort, University of Science and Technology. Dear students, discussion agenda is that first of all I will again give you a concise intro of Shelley, and then we will discuss the major novels, dramas, travel narrative, translations, prose work, and one essay which he has written, and it is very famous one. And then we will look at what type of poetry he has written. This is the whole agenda for today's lecture. Now let's move toward the first slide. Shelley, as I told you in the last lecture, is one of the major English Romantic poet. He belongs to the second generation of Romantic poets. Another feature which I described to you in the last lecture, that he is a lyric poet and one of the finest lyrical poet of the English language. He is famous for some of his works. Ozymandias, it is a sonnet, Ode to the West Wind, To a Skylark, The Mask of Anarchy. The last one is basically a political poem. In it, Shelley's call for freedom is the first statement of the principle of non-violent resistance. He also wrote long poems, and basically these are the visionary poems, as I told you, and we will discuss in the coming slide also, that he was a revolutionary poet. It includes, the first one is Adonais, the Revolt of Islam, and after that Prometheus, Unbound, and The Triumph of Life. These are the few poems which I named here. The last one is the unfinished one, because Shelley died before completing that work. As I told you earlier that he was a revolutionary poet, Shelley's life is very much unconventional, and he was basically following ideals, and he was living that life which was having uncompromising idealism, and he combined the unconventional and uncompromising idealism with the skeptical voice, and this very thing made him both authoritative and defamed during his lifetime. For his revolutionary qualities, he became one of the idol of the coming 2 or 3 generation of poets, not only in England but also in the other languages. Poets influenced by Shelley includes Victorian poets like Browning and Tennyson, and we have some of the pre-Raphaelite poets including Rossetti, Swinburne, as well as he influenced William Butler Yeats. The poets from the other languages, like 2 of the Indian poets whom were influenced by P.B. Shelley, are Jiban Das and Subramani Bharati. He was also admired by Karl Marx and Bertrand Russell. He was famous for his association with his contemporary poets like John Keats and Lord Byron. Another important thing that he married Mary Shelley, and she was a novelist. These very features are some of the glimpses from the life of P.B. Shelley. Now let's move to the next slide, in which we see that he contributed in the various fields of literature. It includes, or we can say that it starts from that he wrote Gothic novels. He also wrote dramas, travel narratives, and he did translations, the important works of Plato. He also wrote number of pamphlets which are very much influential. Not only these pamphlets influenced his close circles, but it influenced a large number from the society. He also wrote essays, critical essays, but he's we know that famous for the poetry which he had written, and it includes long poems, political and satirical poems. It also includes ballads, odes and sonnets. So now let's move toward the first work, Zastrozzi. Basically it is a Gothic novel, and most of the literary persons of that era, the Romantic era, they were somehow connected to this Gothic aspect of the literature. So this novel, Zastrozzi, it is also pronounced as Zastrasi. It was first published in 1810, and the special thing is that Shelley published it anonymously, and we see that it is the first of the two Gothic novels of Shelley. The other one is Saint Erwine. This very novel outlines and describes us that how he views the world. So his aesthetic worldview has been presented in this very villain Zastrozzi. It also summarizes his earliest and initial opinions on reckless type of self-indulgence and violent revenge. So this very novel, which is a picture of the aesthetic worldview of P.B. Shelley. Now let's move towards the lyrical drama of Shelley, and that is Hellas. This is the drama which he wrote in 1821, and it was published later on in 1822. This drama was written when he was in Pisa. Basically, he wrote this drama for raising money for the Greek War of Independence. One another special thing about this drama is that this is the last work which was published during his lifetime. This drama, you will be very astonished that this very drama is written in the Turkish setting, and you see that it focuses on Sultan Mehmed, and Sultan Mehmed is that Ottoman king who was basically attacking the Greeks, and we see that Shelley is there, and he was raising money for Greek War of Independence. Here you can see that in this very drama Shelley showed that Mehmed is having sleepless nights, or restless mind, and he is worried, having nightmares, and he tries to seek help from a Jew, and he believes that very Jew has the magical powers, and he can interpret the dreams, especially the dreams of Mehmet. In this drama, we see that Mehmet is very much in the phase of despair, and in spite of the number of Turkish victories, he thinks that as if he is losing the war. So basically, here he is portraying a picture that the Greece is rising against the Ottomans. So the whole setting again very much a Turkish setting, as we see in number of other poetical works and other works which he has written. He included that setting because he was himself very much influenced with these very Ottoman settings. He also wrote a travel narrative. This very narrative is named as History of 6 Weeks Tour through a part of France, Switzerland, Germany and Holland. Basically, this very tour describes 2 trips taken by Shelley along with his wife Mary Shelley and Mary Shelley's sister. Actually, she was the stepsister, Claremont, and they travelled. The first very tour was across the Europe in 1814, and the second one was that they took to Lake Geneva in 1816. So it is basically a travel narrative by Mary Shelley and P.B. Shelley. This very work was published in 1870. This work is divided into 3 sections. The first part is a journal, and the second one it includes 4 letters, and the last one is the Percy Shelley's poem Mont Blanc, which I will describe to you in the coming slides. Now let's move to the poetry collection published by P.B. Shelley. This very collection, named as Original Poetry by Victor and Casier, this very work was a joint venture between Shelley and his sister Elizabeth. It was published in 1810, and in this very volume, which consists of 16 poems and a fragment, Shelley contributed 11 poems. Out of these 11 poems, 7 poems are lyrical poems, and it includes 4 Gothic poems. He also included a political poem naming as The Irishman's Song. And we see that his sister also contributed 5 poems, including 3 lyrical poems and 2 verse epistles. In this very volume of poetry, which is joint venture between Shelley and his sister, has 11 poems, 7 lyrical poems, 4 Gothic poems, political poem, and the 3 lyrical poems from Elizabeth and 2 verse epistles. In the next slide, we will look at the philosophical poem of Shelley named as Queen Mab. This philosophical poem is basically utopian allegory. One of the large works written by Shelley. It was published in 1813. It is written in 9 cantos and with 17 notes. This very poem is basically providing the foundation to the Shelley's theory of revolution. In this poem he depicts two-pronged revolt. In the first step we see that he suggests changes in the nature and the virtuousness of human beings. And at the second level we see that he suggests changes in the institution. So in this poem he condemns institution of kingship, or the government, church or religion, property, marriage and Christianity. Very important thing is that he wrote this poem when he was only 18-year-old. Now I will move to the next slide. That is, again, you will see that revolt word that is always there in the poetry of Shelley. In this poem, very much you can see that inspiring for the Muslims. When we look at this very word, it at once attracts the attention, the revolt of Islam. This very poem is in 12 cantos, and it was written in 1817. Original title of this very poem was Lone and Sitna, the Revolution of the Golden City, or a vision of the 19th century. Actually, the plot is centered around two characters named as Lone and Sitna, and they start a revolution against the ruler of a fictional state named as Argolis. And again we see Turkish setting. You will see that this very ruler is modeled on the Sultan of Ottoman Empire. Name of this very poem, as the title shows, that it might be connected with the religion of Islam, but it is not like this. It has no direct connection with Islam. Or he generally discusses the concepts of religion in this very poem. So we see that in this very poem he discusses those Eastern themes and archetypes, but actually he is discussing that symbolic story of liberation and revolutionary idealism to which he was always connected. But we see that he is disillusioned, as all other romantic poets. They got disillusioned of the French Revolution. He was also disillusioned, and we see that he was trying to sort out a transfigured picture of French Revolution. So in this poem he hopes for the future regeneration of the world through a revolution. And Turkish setting, Ottoman Empire, because he was himself at that time very much influenced by this very the Ottoman Empire, and he was the part of that Greek war of independence. After this we will look at another important work of Shelley, that is Epipsychidion. This very major poetical work was published in 1821. It was subtitled Verses Addressed to the Noble and Unfortunate Lady Amelia Fife, now imprisoned in a convent. So, and that is the subtitle of this poem, Epipsychidion. Basically, this poem is about Shelley's platonic love for a beautiful young Italian girl, and the title suggests this very thing. Basically, this title is a Greek word which means concerning or about a little soul. Epi means about or around, and Psychidion means little soul. So this is the story of a young Italian girl and the platonic love of Shelley. In the coming slide we will discuss two poems. The first one is To a Skylark. Basically, it was published along with lyrical drama Prometheus Unbound. Actually, it was inspired by the walk when Shelley was walking with his wife Mary Shelley in the countryside near Livorno, a city in Italy. Basically, it describes the appearance and the song of Skylark. So, this very poem was published in 1820, and it is one of the important poems of Shelley. The Cloud is another major work of Shelley that was published in 1820. In this poem, which consists of 6 stanzas, he used an apastic meter in which we see that 2 unaccented syllables are followed by accented syllable. So 2 very celebrated poems I just mentioned to you in this very slide. So the next poem is Adonais, and it is an elegy on the death of John Keats, one of the best and most well-known work of Shelley. Basically, it follows the tradition of John Milton's Lycidas, and in the history of English literature, we see that this very elegy is placed with Milton's Lycidas and Tennyson's In Memoriam. So 3 great elegies in English literature. This elegy comprises of 495 lines, and these very 495 lines are grouped into 55 Spenserian stanzas. So it was not singly or merely influenced by Milton. Actually, Shelley was also influenced by many classical elegies because he studied and translated many of them. Its title is modeled on an ancient work. Achilles, basically it is an epic by Statius, who was the 1st century Roman poet, and he wrote that very elegy on the death of the Greek Adonis. Adonis is the god of fertility. So some of the critics gave another reference, but the first one is that he got the title from this very epic poem. And the other hint is that some critics suggest that Shelley used Virgil's 10th eclogue, that was basically in the praise of Cornelius, and he modeled the whole elegy on that very pattern. The next work is The Devil's Walk. It is a ballad, a broadsheet ballad, that was published by P.B. Shelley in 1812. It consists of 7 irregular ballad stanzas of 49 lines. It is not a simple ballad poem. It is basically a criticism on the British government, and Shelley satires the whole system. In this ballad, it is shown that Satan is meeting with the key members of the British government. Now we move towards the odes. The first one is Mont Blanc. Basically, it was published along with as a section of the travel narrative of Shelley. This very ode is basically intended to give us the scenery through which he travelled along with Mary Shelley. So another ode is Hymn to Intellectual Beauty, 84-line ode. It was written in 1860. Basically, it is influenced by Rousseau's The Novel of Sensibility. Another important ode, that is Ode to the West Wind. I quoted a few of the lines in the last lecture. It was written in 1819 in Italy. Originally, it was published in 1820 as a part of collection along with Prometheus Unbound, a lyrical drama. It was published along with that. One important thing, that Shelley wants to spread his message the message of revolution, the message of reforms, and he took this wind as a tool. So the wind is that word which he used as a metaphor for spreading change. Through this very word wind, he wants to send his message to all the world, and this very message is of reform and revolution. Now we move towards the sonnets. Ozymandias is basically a title of two sonnets which were published in 1818. The first one was written by Shelley, and the second one was written by his fellow poet Horace Smith. Horace Smith also wrote a sonnet on the same topic and same title. Let's look at another important work. Basically, it is an essay, a defense of poetry. This essay was written in 1821, and it was published in 1840 after the death of Shelley. So we call it a posthumously published essay. It contains Shelley's famous claim that poets are unacknowledged legislator of the world. This very statements mean that the poets are the one who gives the idea, new ideas to the whole world. This is the last work of Shelley, which was unfinished because before completing this he died, and the name of this work is The Triumph of Life. It was his unfinished masterpiece. He wrote the poem in Italy in early summer of 1822, modeled on Petrarch and Dante works, Petrarch's Triumphi and Dante's Divine Comedy, and it is a very important work, but unfortunately, accidentally, Shelley drowned on 8th July 1822 during a storm when he was travelling from Leghorn. His ship wrecked and he drowned there. Thank you, students. That's all for today's lecture, and thank you very much for listening passionately. Take care. Allah Hafiz. Inshallah, see you in the next lecture.